Suicidal thinking or behavior is complex. Add a triggering or traumatic event and easy access to means of death, and the results can be tragic. A fact that my family knows all too well, as I mentioned earlier. My 20-year-old son, Nathan Isert, had been recruited as a walk-on for the Western Kentucky University basketball team in the summer of 2000. My husband, Stephen Ulrich, Nathan's stepdad, explains the painful lesson that none of us, our family, Nathan's friends or teammates, or the coaching staff at Western saw coming.
In Nathan's freshman year, Nathan worked really hard. I mean, he stayed there during the summer. He worked hard, and he became a basketball player. And he became an athlete through that work that he did. And at the beginning of the basketball season of his sophomore year, the coach came to him and offered him a scholarship. I know Nathan's feet was way off the ground, and unfortunately they were way off the ground that evening because he came down in a pickup game and injured his foot, and it's an injury that would not heal properly all during the year. It would prevent him from doing what he loved, his commitment to a team. I mean, he had to be beating himself up because he's going, I need to be in there, I need to do, but the injury prevented him from doing that. Nathan put off warning signs. He put off all kinds of warning signs, but none of us was aware of it to see it. I firmly believe that if we all would have known then what we knew today, Nathan would be alive today. Nobody ever talked to me about depression. Nobody ever gave me warning signs. There's never a pamphlet or anything else. But now looking back, I can see where he was slipping into depression, struggling to keep his head above water on the things that were pulling him under, but yet not wanting to show me or any of his family that he was drowning. He was slowly drowning and grasping for breaths, and we didn't even see it.
According to a recent study, roughly 1 in 5 soldiers returning from Iraq and Afghanistan displays symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, putting them at higher risk for suicide. Nicole Ryan's husband, Andrew, and their close friend, Chris Wimsett, joined the Marine Corps together. After multiple tours of duty in Iraq, Nicole could see the signs of PTSD in Chris, but never suspected that it could lead to his suicide.
He was so proud of everything that he had as a Marine, and he was proud of what he was doing. And when he went to Iraq, he was excited to go and to make a difference and to do his job. And when he came back, he was just different, and it had changed his life. Chris was very angry and standoffish. He didn't have that sparkle in his eye. He didn't have that, laugh. He wasn't carefree and fun, and it was really sad to see, and it always bothered me, but he'd always say, "Oh, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong, I'm good, I'm okay," and I didn't know any different. I think that the Marine Corps, that the military, that everyone needs to be able to recognize the signs, to be able to see them, to be able to help their loved ones, their friends, whoever it may be. Because had I known what Chris was going through, could I have changed the outcome of what happened? Maybe not, but I at least could have been there to a capacity that he felt like he had someone to talk to, that he didn't have to feel like he was completely alone. When we got to the funeral home, I remember walking up to his casket, and I just kind of stood there, and even for that whole first day, I don't think that it had really sunk in. And then when it was finally time for us to go to the cemetery and for everything, then I realized. And I just remember thinking, this can't be. He couldn't have left all these people. He was happy, he was okay. Why didn't any of us know? What was our problem? And I just remember I wanted to know why. I wanted to know why. I wanted to ask him, I wanted to take him and shake him and wake him up and say why. And I couldn't do that.
As a teacher, Yolanda Kelser Clay feels that education is power. Pursuing information about mental illness, including depression and addiction in her family and friends, eventually made her more aware of her own long-term bouts with depression and suicidal thoughts. Now Yolanda uses her own experience to help others in crisis move toward recovery.
Since I was 15, I think that's when it really hit me the hardest. I lost my grandmother to breast cancer, and she had been my rock, and I had basically lived with her. Even though my parents were there, they lived in the house beside my grandmother, and when she was gone, it was like a part of me was buried as well. And my depression got even worse, to the point that I just really didn't want to go on. And my parents really didn't believe in going to a psychiatrist at that time or a therapist. So I was in my 30s before I actually became treated for major depression. And I found that it was a biological disorder, that I wasn't a bad parent necessarily. My parents hadn't been bad parents. It was just like if I had been diagnosed with asthma and there was a family history of asthma or diabetes or heart disease or hypertension, and the propensity was there for it to be played out.
One of the net effects of stigma is to cause us to turn away from other people and to believe that this is something that cannot be discussed, and if we can't discuss it, we can't really get a handle on it cognitively and emotionally. We can't bring it to some degree of resolution. So stigma is something that I think isolates people from one another and isolates people from the broader community. If we could never say, my family member has cancer, how isolating would that be?
Jenny Jones understands this stigma better than most. She has lost far too many family members to suicide, cousins, aunts, her own grandmother. Jenny went along with the family code for many years. We don't talk about the suicide deaths in our family. However, the autopsy report following her mother's death changed Jenny's life and propelled her into action and advocacy.
My world changed the day my mom died. My world was shattered the day the autopsy report came back. I've spent the last 10 years trying to put the pieces of my world back together. One of the ways I've done that is by getting educated in mental health issues, educated in mental health awareness, learning more about suicide, learning more about suicide prevention. And through doing that, I basically went to my brothers and told my brothers that while my mom might be proud of us for keeping suicide a secret and keeping her suicide a secret, that I didn't really feel like keeping her suicide a secret was keeping or was going to keep anybody else in our family alive. I've said many times before that I feel like keeping suicide a secret perpetuates suicide. One of the next most influential suicides in my family was my grandmother. My mom was 19 when my grandmother died by suicide. And when you look at suicide, is often portrayed as a candle that was blown out early. And I kind of think of my grandmother in that same way as a candle whose light was blown out early, and then the fact that there are no pictures of her that exist. I have a grandmother that I don't even know what she looked like.